Okay.
Thank you, Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this interview. Today, I gathered three ISTP friends, and I, an ENFP, am going to moderate a talk between all four of us. So we have Jess, Binyamin, and Dave. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Good.
Ready for an ISTP talk.
I like the hesitation before great and yeah, sure. Like it's like yeah. So, okay. So a lot of this kind of will center today on um like on the fact that like we have completely different functions and completely different ways of using them, but I think that there's still like a lot we can learn from each other, specifically me learn from you guys, because I always love talking to you guys, because seeing the world through your eyes really gives me like more perspective on what I do and don't do. So I guess I'm curious, like, what are your guys' experiences like with ENFPs in general? I guess we can start with Jess. I'll call
Okay.
on you.
I meet a lot of ENFPs in my life, and I don't know what it is, but like I have one that I live with and work with. He's it's like 10 years. I feel like I end up working with, I train horses for a living, and I feel like it's a weird thing to think that a lot of NFs would do. I mean, it is like animals, maybe if they have something like that, but they end up training, like there's a lot of them training horses and doing jobs around that. But something like my experiences with them, like specifically, is there's a lot of, they go with the flow a lot. Like they'll follow your lead if you're doing something very physical. Like I have less problems with them, or the higher the NE is, I have less problems with them kind of just doing the concrete stuff, which maybe you wouldn't think compared to SI, but it just doesn't clash with the SE as much. But there's a lot of, I would call it negligence, or the way that they do things is, it's not efficient or an easy way. It's always like in a very like roundabout kind of, takes up a lot of time
Yeah.
or effort kind of way of doing
Yeah,
things.
that reminds me, like, not an ISTP, but an ISFP I knew who also had the NE blind spot. He was saying that it seems like people who lead with NE lack contextual, like, or situational awareness. Like, I think that NE can be like contextual awareness, but I think SE is very situational awareness. It's like you do realize that this is about to like fall on your head, right? It's like,
Yeah, it's like this
no, I
bad thing
don't.
could happen.
Like I'm precariously balanced on the edge of a rail, and people are like, "This is like kind of like dangerous, right?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even notice the drop was that."
Yeah,
It happens like a
exactly.
lot.
That's
Yeah. And
exactly what I see them doing all day.
do you find yourself becoming the person who kind of saves the day sometimes for such ENFPs? To be like,
I feel
look at that, careful.
sometimes, but other times it's like they're doing something and I'm kind of like in the area, and I will either be the victim of whatever they did. So I'll be left with, they'll do something in a way that's just leaving a problem open to happen, and the problem will happen when I'm in the area and I have to deal with it. That's usually
Oh
what
my
happens.
god, cleaning up the mess that NE doesn't notice it left.
Yeah.
This is something that it's hard for my ego to hear, but I have learned to humbly take into consideration. Yeah. What about you, Dave? What are your, I guess, experiences interacting with ENFPs?
I have quite a bit of experience actually. Somehow, even though the types are quite different, I feel like some of my closest friends are ENFPs. So my closest friend back home in the U.S., he's an ENFP. We've been friends for like
Oh, so
over
cute.
15 years now. Yeah. And then my closest friend in Berlin, I also suspect she's a ENFP. So it's interesting because like you never quite get each other. You really get what's going on in the other person's brain, but like
Hmm.
somehow you always get into trouble together and you always like have like adventures and funny things. And a lot of times the sense of humor is still like pretty in sync, you know? I don't know. I guess you both seem to like hanging out together, and you both like the things that you get into. But it also keeps things interesting because you never really quite figure the other person out too. So it's always like it's just I don't know. It's a very like fun relationship, I think, and you never can quite figure it out, and it's always yeah, something surprising. And yeah, so I would say yeah, even though you don't really get each other so much, there is good chemistry there, I think, as long as you're like
Hmm.
willing to give each other the benefit of the doubt and recognize that you're kind of from different planets.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I'm like debating between responding to that, but then I know I can kind of get long-winded, so I'm actually going to hand it to Binyamin and then I'm going to respond. So
Okay,
that's what.
sounds good.
All right. Yeah,
So
Binyamin, what are your experiences?
in real life, I think there's one ENFP at work who is always has fun making stuff up. He'll come with information that is obviously he got it from nowhere, and he's just inventing it and making it up just to try to challenge people. And like people will get sucked into his sort of narrative and start arguing with him, and he'll just be there with a smirk on his face. And I go to him, I'm like, I see you, I see what you're doing. Like you're, yeah, it's like
And
professional
what does he
trolls
say?
like that.
What does he say when you say, "I see what you're doing"?
He just laughs it off and yeah.
But like he doesn't deny that he was indeed
No,
doing
does not
the
deny
thing
it. No, he's honest about it. Yeah. But
That's great.
it's the funny thing is he can still admit it and still laugh about it and still suck people in the next time. So
You admire that?
yeah, for sure. Yeah. He doesn't well, because like he has no accountability to what's true or anything. He'll just make stuff up, and he's okay just making false information, spreading it around. And I don't know. Yeah, for me it's
It's just a
something that has
departure.
direct
Yeah, it's
reasoning,
just a
yeah.
departure from the seriousness of TI. It's just
Right.
like I would never even think to break out of my default state, but whoa, you've just completely smashed it to smithereens, and it's amusing, but also a bit disturbing. Yeah. So for me, I think it's interesting that I guess the first thing that popped into my head after listening to you guys was I was thinking about how in the type community there's kind of like this sort of I guess I don't want to say legendary, but I'm just going to say it legendary sort of conflict between like NFPs and NFJs at times to where like I just see all the forums, all the like video comments, all the like Facebook groups, everyone's just like debating like about the validity of their perspectives. Um, and on the flip side, even though STPs use like the same functions as NFJs, I don't find myself in contention about what reality is with them. Like it just totally like bypasses that. And I think that that sort of dynamic is what I find fundamentally interesting because while I do have many close like ENFJ friends, I would say that like I have an ESTP best friend, and in high school I had an ISTP best friend, and right now I have like a good ISTP friend, and I do love you very much, Jess, and consider you a friend. But like, I think overall, I'm just so curious as to like the nature of why we don't seem to clash and kind of let the other be who they're gonna be. And I guess I kind of want to like unpack that a little bit in a group because I could just kind of solo talk about it, but it's much more interesting in that context. Like what do you guys think is the magic ingredients of why we do somehow get along? I think Dave did touch on it a bit, so I don't know about you, Jess. What are your thoughts?
I think, and Dave, at least what I'm gonna say, Dave kind of touched on it, but I think it's you can play together, if that makes sense. Like you can play with ideas, you can just do stuff, and they'll do like a back and forth. And like Dave was talking about the humor, it's like when you're like, well, what if this happens, or whatever your style of humor is, like you can kind of like go back and forth with the I think is what at least that's what I run into.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like a lot of NI like users, like NI saviors, will just be kind of like, "Oh, that's dumb," or "No, no, no." But then I feel like ISTPs and just yeah, like ISTPs will kind of be like, "Oh, okay." Like they seem to be able to see the origin of what the NE stems from, which is foundationally SI, And because you guys don't completely like have that as like a blind spot, you can like kind of like you can kind of see where that comes from, not enough to buy into it, but enough to kind of be like, well, I'll let you like, you know, lollygag that around or something. And I think that that is kind of key to feeling understood by NE, because when we're like trolling, which as a certified troll who deals memes as my currency of choice when it comes to friendships, I really appreciate when people just kind of like let me be witnessed, because without a good grasp of how I show up in the SE, I like to think that like I can like alter reality for people. And I think that I'm really drawn to ISTPs because I can tell they don't fall for it, but they still like that I'm trying to and find it hilarious. And I think it's hilarious that they're not falling for it and that they're letting me try. So it's just kind of like, it's in a sense, they're still enabling me to be me. And that's like key to play, because you can't take things too seriously if you're playing. And ISTPs are just like, I think that like they don't seem to have the same sort of dogged thirst to like fix the world that I feel like the same functions but in a different order manifest in the ENFJ, the INFJ. They're kind of just like observing it and very good at like kind of rolling with whatever the punches of the hour tend to be, which is so interesting. Like people have mistyped a lot of ISTPs, I think, as having more NE than they actually do because of the chillness with NE. They're not going to be like, I don't know about that, or you know, like not temperamental, which I think is really cool. If anyone
Yeah, I
wants to
think
chime
like
in on
having
that.
the like observer functions in the middle for an ISTP makes it easy to get along with other people's observer functions. So if you have any at the top and you're doing your anything, we can follow along. It's not really our way of doing it, but it's not like offensive to us or completely beyond to us or anything like that. So I think like pretty much any observer is gonna like, I think, be able to jive with it with an ISTP for the most part. Of course, there are factors outside of personality that make it to where you have conflicts with other people, but like looking just at the personality parts, I think, yeah, the ISTP and observer relationships tend to go pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a very good quality to have, especially because I think that people that don't use TI to like flip it, because I use FI and TE, it's like I think that we also associate like TI as like a very judgmental like function, like a function that's always prepared to like not necessarily roast you, but at least innerly like silently like judge you and be like, well, you're just doing it wrong or something. And I've actually found like ICPs aren't judgmental. And I think Jess and I were having a lively conversation about this the other day, that you guys don't go around like being uppity about people. And I think that I have to check myself sometimes to not project that you guys are just like getting annoyed more often than you actually are. So yeah, I guess my question to you guys would be like, do you consider yourself judgmental? And if other people likely have called you judgmental before, like what is your response to that?
So like I think it's a common misnomer that we judge people because the TI can be quite harsh, like this is stupid, this is wrong. But usually it's not aimed at you personally. It's usually aimed at
Mhm.
like whatever rationale that you had. So it's like we are judgy towards whatever explanation or reasons that you have, but it has nothing to do with you usually. There was a good anecdote in a book I read from Richard Feynman, the
Ah, I
famous
love it
physicist.
when the SCNI users give anecdotes. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So like,
mhm.
anyway, he's a world-renowned physicist, really cool guy, and I'm 99.9999% sure he's TI somewhere. And he was like, he was talking about when he argues with people, and a lot of times they'll put some sort of reasoning forth, and a lot of times he comes off really harsh, like this is wrong, blah blah blah. And the reason that that happens is because like the person kind of fades in the background, and the only thing that's present there is what they said and the logic of
Oh,
it.
that's
So
such
he's
a
like
good
speaking to the
analogy.
logic. He's
Uh-huh.
not actually talking to them. So sometimes it comes off like super harsh. And he was explaining kind of like why he does that and everything. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. But
Yeah. um, without TI, it took me a long time to learn to detach my identity from what I'm saying or like what I'm doing. And
mm,
so I would feel like personally critiqued or attacked because I would be putting my sort of personal, like just the crux of who I am into what I'm doing. So if it was confusing to people, or if they felt some kind of like brought it into question, I would feel like I, as an entity, am now being brought into question, and then just like
Mhm.
get reactive. And I think that it's interesting because TI is truly detached, and that was like a visceral illustration of the detachedness literally manifesting as floating above. I think it's a great way to think of it, because like I totally forget that like TI is not just this tool that's like tainted with this FI of like, haha, I'm gonna one up you. And that's what I think people get wrong all the time. They're like, oh, how's it feel to be so smart and able to like call everything stupid, huh? And it's like, I mean, like, I'm just trying to interact with the logic, right? And part of it is like assessing its accuracy. It's just like engaging with it. And I started realizing, oh, it's actually like a kind of an invitation to kind of roughhouse almost at times, because it's not like we're actually like trying to like kill each other or trying to like hurt each other. And that was like really powerful, but still difficult for me to like realize.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, it's totally understandable. Now it can get personal actually in some cases when you're doing the logic
some
thing.
cases,
If it's
yeah.
something that we've thought about a lot and it's really personal to us, and you start stepping on it, then we might get a bit defensive. So that can definitely happen. But
Yeah. Would you say that, do you have a good gauge of when, like, in what the patterns are for when it gets personal and when it stays pretty detached?
yeah, if it's generally if it's something that I've like spent a fuckload of time on, like, oh, I hope I can cuss on here. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. My
Okay. So
channel is not kid friendly because kids can't understand functions until they, yeah, but go ahead.
okay. Cool, yeah. If it's something I've just spent a lot of time on, and I feel like someone's just like talking nonsense in like a very brazen way, like a very know-it-all way about something they don't really
Mm-hmm.
know that much about. For some reason, that
Oh.
really flares my ego up. Like, you know what I mean? So like with like boxing, is example I always pull out. Like I boxed for a long time, and people start talking about boxing that have never boxed or whatever. Then some reason I just get angry. Like I don't know. Like it's kind of stupid, but yeah. There's just,
Hmm.
yeah, anything that's been your baby for anything you've spent years and hours and hours and hours and hours, and somebody just comes in, yeah, I know about that, but then I don't know, yeah, it just triggers me.
Yeah, like I'm wondering if there's also a reaction to the FE, because if someone was like kind of shitting on boxing, but then inviting sort of a discussion in, and then maybe I guess they wouldn't be shitting on it at that point, but they would be bringing it into question. Then there'd be an opt-in for you to engage. But I realized maybe it's also the FE way that people are talking about it that seems closed, perhaps, to actual inclusivity of like TIs interacting and having fun talking about the subject together. If it's like, I'm just going to say one solid conclusion that has no rational backing, I can see why TI, especially if they've thought it through so much, would be like, whoa, that's so reductive that that's like offensive, right?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, we do like oddly enough get, or Leo, I would speak for myself. Maybe Binyamin, Jess, you can speak on this as well. But I definitely get triggered when the FE is not um, being respected. I guess too, like that.
Mm.
And I, of course, I'm not doing that all the time. I'm also disrespecting it, but I don't know. Somehow that is definitely triggering as well. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if somebody's worse than me at it. It's like, yo, I'm the horrible at this, and you're even worse than I am. Like, what kind of if somebody's not
Yeah.
doing your worst function well, it's somehow the most triggering thing. I don't know. Do you guys feel similar, Benjamin, Jess?
Yeah. Go
Uh,
ahead, Jess.
yeah, I feel like it's not, there's a certain level where I just don't take it seriously. Like if I think
Mm.
it's obvious that they don't know what they're talking about, I just let it roll off my back. But it's like if someone's okay with spreading misinformation and posing themselves as an authority, or when people don't, and I know this is just because I'm TI Dom, but when people won't, if you're interested in something, if you won't put in the work to really understand it, or at least some of it, and no one can understand everything all the time,
Mhm.
but if you care about it and you won't put effort into it, that makes me mad. Like really mad.
Mm.
So if
Huh.
somebody's just like, if they're interested in something, it could be anything that I happen to be interested in, and all the work that went into it. It's not so much necessarily that the work that I went into it, it's just knowing the difference between that you did put the work into it and that you're just really not putting any effort into it, but you consider it something you care about. If you don't care about it, then I don't care.
It's like show
Yeah.
me the receipts. Show me you care. Like, show me the proof. Yeah. What do you think, Binyamin?
So to bring it back to ENFPs, I think like a big commonality between us and them is just the EP, like the EP side of us, where it's like just live and let live. You don't want to control
Yes.
each other. You don't want to force each other to do anything you're not ready for or you don't feel comfortable with, or you're not pushing on each other in that way. And then it's like, if you ever get into an argument with an ENFP, they don't really take the argument that seriously. And so you can't really get into that place where you are arguing tensely, because
Yeah.
they don't take it seriously. And I think a lot of the times too, when I see like an ENFP embarrass themselves, like they're having fun doing it. And it's like, you have to pretend at least that you're like ashamed of them and embarrassed of them. But on the inside, we're like laughing. Good job. Like,
Yeah, like I can tell that like, the ISTP and ESTPs, they're just kind of like, you're just being you. And like, as long as it doesn't like get in my business, like whatever.
Right.
Like I'm thinking of the archetype of like, I think when a TJ kind of like a TJ boss, like a TP sort of subordinate, like, oh, you think you're so smart, or like just like kind of shitting on anything that you contribute. And then it's just like this clash happening. And I realized that it is like for them, like disrespecting the FE, and also their TI isn't that great to begin with at all, but they think it must be so good. And then TP is kind of like stewing. And I realized that the NFP usually just doesn't care enough to like power trip people. I have an ESTP friend. I know you guys are ISTPs, but he's like the kind of person I do talk to recurringly who is an STP. He like is really sensitive to those power dynamics in that sense, where it's kind of like the FE is needed, but he isn't the person to create it, but he will still feel like this sense of like someone's intentions are to kind of like one up him. Like, do you guys relate to power dynamics in that sense? Because I don't realize when someone's trying to one up me unless they're trying to like say you hurt me, but I can tell they're not that hurt or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't feel like people are ever trying to one up me. They probably are. Probably just can't say it.
Interesting.
There probably are power dynamics, but I'm blissfully unaware, I think, most of the time.
Ooh, interesting.
I would say I'm mildly aware of them, but it's not something that I think about all the time. But if it comes up, if it's something extreme, I'll notice it.
Oh, that's so interesting. Huh. Like, what about you, Binyamin?
So I try to stay out of power dynamics as much as possible. Like avoid them. If I see it happening, I'll try, but sometimes you can't avoid it. And I do notice it, and it does irk you.
Ooh, wait, so you can like kind of see it coming enough to avoid it? That's so interesting.
Yes, like you could see it coming a little bit sometimes to avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even think of an example of what power dynamics. I think I'm probably the least aware of this. My NF is completely last, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, like personally for me, I don't really pay attention to them either. Like if someone's trying to like one up me, I just pretend I don't notice if I even notice in the first place. But I've been thinking about this more because it would explain why both of us, like ENFPs and ICPs, can be seen as so chill by the community, because we just don't really take people's shit because we're not noticing it, or we kind of know how to duck out of it in time to not get hit by it. So I think it's a similarity because like
I think like in my youth I was completely unaware of it, and I was really bad at it. Like I was causing power dynamics to happen without even being aware of it. And so that's, I think, why I got so much more aware of it, is because of that, because I was probably triggering a lot of people into power dynamics where now
do you have an example that you're willing to give?
Yeah, okay. So like in class, when you raise your hand, right? So like in class, if someone raises their hand and they get the answer wrong, and then you raise your hand, so I raise my hand and I get it right, and then I look at them and smile. Like it's like that's like it's like something. Yeah. So
is that power dynamics, or is that just being an asshole?
So it was being
Using
an
your
asshole, but
powers.
it just not being aware of what I was doing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah,
Wow.
being more aware of that kind of thing.
Well, see, it's interesting listening to that because when I hear you give this example, what happens to my NE and FI is I like play out the scenario of like a young Binyamin in a classroom and it literally happening. And then what I do is I put myself as the ENFP crystal in Binyamin's seat and like kind of go through the scenario. I happen to get it right. But then I'm realizing that what I would do is I'd be like, don't look at them, don't look at them, don't look at them. Because what if they're
Exactly.
mad I got the answer? And
Right.
I'm realizing that I do respond to power dynamics then, but like more like trying to make people feel comfortable. Like, I am friend. Don't crucify me or something like that.
Right.
That's so interesting. Wow. But yeah. So I guess like you guys are probably all different ages, but like what do you think about like FI specifically, like introverted feeling? Like I guess that's like a general question on purpose because I'm like, feel free to like kind of say the first thing that comes into your head. I can like be more specific too if needed. But I think that because for you guys, like it's like FI, like in order to access FI, you'd have to ostensibly in theory turn off your TI. And I don't know if it feels that like FI is like an eternal vice or like a thorn in your side when you see in other people or experience it in yourself or something.
I think it parallels TI enough in other people sometimes that it doesn't really bother me, or I can see how it's structured similar.
Oh.
But it depends on what type it is and the individual and stuff, but sometimes they're very staunch about like their FI things, but they can be a little bit shy to communicate those things or
Yeah.
talk about it or have like hard conversations. And I'm the kind of person that will have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. What about in yourself when have you ever had a moment where you were like irrationally emotional and could not for the life of yourself stop feeling that even though your TI was trying to like soothe or something?
I usually, if I do think it's not justified, then I mean, I still feel it, but part of the TI process is just being more removed from it. So I'm not sure, like I can distract myself with figuring out why and all the different moving parts of what's happening that makes me feel that way. Instead, it doesn't make me not feel it, but I'm just not focused on it, if that makes sense.
That's so interesting. Yeah. What about you guys?
I think like so what you said before about TI like coming off judgmental to people on the
Mhm.
like the FI-T axis. I feel like FI can kind of come off that way.
Yes,
It's
finally
really-
someone in the group finally said it so I can talk about that because I
Okay.
agree. As an FI user, I am very judgmental, but just go ahead.
So it's like yeah, so a lot of times I feel like if I can express like disgust or a lot of dislike towards either one of your choices being moral, amoral, or immoral or whatever, or like even something that you like as being like how do you like that, you know? Like I have some FI people in my life and I'll like show them a song I really like and they're like, "Ugh." I don't like it.
Yeah, and they expect you to like rumble with that. They expect you to be like, "Oh, well, I like it, so
Yeah.
whatever."
Well,
As
it
opposed
feels
to you're
like
just like,
they're kind of the standard for what is like valuable or not, you know? Like it's like they
mm-hmm,
like if, you know, which I don't think is fair. I don't think they're actually doing that. I think it's
mm-hmm,
a miscommunication, much like when we're TIing, people are like, "Oh, you're judging me, you think I'm stupid." It's probably the same thing, like with the FI situation where you feel like they're attacking you when they're just expressing to you how this song or how this whatever makes them feel, but it's not like I think towards you
mm-hmm.
necessarily. But it can feel like that sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I actually want to break tradition and say that sometimes we actually are being unfairly judgmental
Oh,
and
okay.
we will like deny it to ourselves and to you. And if you're kind of like, like I guess I should give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm a little skeptical. I found that like sometimes FI can kind of be threatened by the fact that they can tell someone is detached from having preferences and will sort of say that kind of thing to try to stir some life within someone. So there kind of is actually a judgment, but it's not about the fact that you don't like the thing. It's more about like, well, what do you like then? Like subconsciously. Like it's kind of like a sort of unanswered, like grading question within us, like the mysteriousness of the detached TI Dom sort of archetype, which I think that even if you don't know functions, you can pick up the patterns of like this person seems to just kind of be like such a, what is it, such a, like, I don't want to say politician, but like just like they anything goes with them. They're like so agreeable. And I think FI users do sometimes take that personally where they could get phased by you. This is like kind of like a
Yeah.
theoretical thing
Yeah.
I've seen
Or kind of it's like
in, yeah.
inauthentic, or it's kind of like, why don't you
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. Oh my God, the authenticity. Like it's
yeah.
basically become a buzzword now. But I think that FI is always trying, FI defines like people's preferences as what is like how they measure authenticity. So if they can't measure your authenticity, then you're like a black hole of mystery to them and they don't like that. And it makes them feel existentially pained, which is why it might sound like there's more FE charge with that statement, because there actually is. You're confusing their subconscious.
Yeah.
Big secret reveal. But I do actually hold a lot of credence to the theory that like we unconsciously do react to having more sort of like not actually well versed but still logical like judgments of like other people, like, oh, like I guess some people just don't have a preference, and there is this tone of like those people are lesser than me because they're harder for me to understand, and not understanding some things. I don't want to like get into that. So yeah.
But I mean, so FI does like to connect to other FI by seeing their FI. Like, you want to see each other's FI and connect on that level. And when you go to a TI user to try to connect on the FI and there's no FI there, it's like, what's going
They're
on?
like, you don't let me connect with you.
Right. Haven't you built
Yeah.
anything? Yeah. And yeah.
Like you must like some ice cream. Like,
Right.
don't you trust me? Like subconsciously, there's like this aspect.
And
And
then
I kind of, yeah. Go ahead.
the one of the things that I do like about FI is how they can just set boundaries sometimes, because for us just to say no to something or to set a boundary, we have to, it's like, oh, that's wrong, so I'm not going to do it, or something like that. We have to find some kind of logical reason why we're setting a boundary. FI is just like, no, don't want to. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Like, that's nice. That'd be nice to have
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
I like that part of me too. I have never really struggled with people pleasing, but on the contrary, that's like because of trauma from like my childhood, and I'm actually trying to learn to like lower my walls down and be more accommodating to other people by like communicating. Like instead of a no, I'm not going to do that. It's like a my first instinct is I don't want to, but I'm curious as to your reasoning about like what you're thinking. Like try and actually invite questioning and like have a discussion as opposed to bye bye. Like, you know, like it used to be like take it or leave it, bitch. But now it's like, okay, let me be more diplomatic and like accommodating and not think that it robs me of my power. Um, oh, so to relate back earlier about power dynamics, I think that I always place myself as lower in the power dynamic as opposed to thinking about the power I do have. So I often feel like at any moment, people are going to just assault me in some way, either with like the physical world being real and like a projectile could come out of nowhere and hit me, or something like they could attack my choices and then I don't know how to like reframe and reinterpret those choices. So I feel like I constantly live in a state of like reactiveness, and that's why the boundaries are there because I feel very fragile. But what I think I've learned, especially actually from ISTP specifically, is like you don't have to be like flaunting empoweredness to like take life as it comes. Like kind of like, okay, I'm getting information now. I'm going to organize it slowly and just see what the answer comes out. Like for me, if I don't see like a solution immediately, I like melt into a panic attack and try to call like some TJ. But then I started to learn I can think for myself. Whoa, like, and that was quite an interesting moment for me. And I think I kind of learned that from watching that, like, the ISTPs have these calm demeanors, but they're also highly capable of reacting to what life like throws at you in some way. Like, this thing broke, okay, we're just gonna sit down and just take what time we need to fix it. Like bumped my car, okay, well, I'm just gonna figure out what's the procedure to do whatever it is. And I think I hated that as a kid. Like, I was like so averse to that, but I really admired that you guys aren't afraid of shit like I am, which is why I can be so confrontational with boundaries, and I'm just unlearning that. And I'm judgmental because I fear judgment from others so much.
Yeah, we fear that too, I think. Well, our fears are usually with people, not with like things breaking down or with things in general. But I think they're definitely we don't come off that way, and it might be not easy to be seen, but we have our some pretty intense people fears as well, I think.
Yeah. And I think that FI can like underestimate that. They're like you guys are just like chilling, like unbothered. You probably don't have any problems. I think can kind of be the temptation to look at you guys as calmly chilling. But would you be able to describe some of these people fears?
Yeah, sure. And I think in general, people we kind of assume that we don't have feelings, or like and so we sometimes we'll get treated, as if we don't need any support there or whatever. Or we just kind of get left
Yeah.
for
We are
ourselves.
going to tear down this movement. Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead. But yeah, like what are those?
But I think like yeah, a lot of the fears, at least for me, maybe you all can speak to this as well, but I think you definitely have a fear of causing other people to suffer or to violating that like FE sort of thing because as you're growing up you're doing that a lot and it kind of blindsides you and so you get to where
Oh,
you
like
develop
you.
that schema to where you're like I am somebody that hurts other people or says the wrong thing or is insulting when I didn't mean to, and so you're kind of on eggshells around people sometimes because you don't want to repeat those like past mistakes. So at least I can be very like, oh God, I'm so sorry if I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to do that. And just, you're kind of always worried about hurting other people's feelings, I think. Yeah.
I'm
What
the
about?
same. But it's more, at least in my life, it's more of being in their way. And I think when you are introverted thinking dominant, you're going to notice when people are kind of intruding on the way that you do things. So when you start to develop FE, at least for me, I think that it's the things that bother you the most are going to be the things that you're worried about imposing on other people. So I'm very strict on the boundaries of when I'm doing something for me, I do it my way. But if I'm helping somebody else or doing something for somebody else, I'm trying to do it how they want to, even though I'm not very good at figuring that out. I'm still trying to do it however they want me to, or however they want something done.
Yeah. What about you, Binyamin?
In terms of, I'm kind of lost of where we're at, but I have something to say anyways.
Wow, and E does that all the time. But go ahead.
But like, so a lot of the time, I assume this is before typology. I assume people also have TI and they have reasons for doing things, and when you have an FI user say no, I don't want to do that, and you ask them why, it really pisses them off, and then they just invent.
Yeah, because they don't know why. That's
right.
why, and they don't like not knowing.
And then rather than saying that, they'll just invent some reason or whatever. And then you'll argue with that reason. You'll be like, that doesn't make sense about this and this. And then that'll get them even more upset because it's like, I gave you a reason. Just let my reason go. Just let.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times when you ask an FI user why, it feels to them like you're questioning their intentions instead of like questioning the logic too. I don't. Maybe you can expand on. Maybe I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. No, I think like I know it sounds like such a small like change, but to me, I feel like when you say the word why, as opposed to like I'm curious as to if you have any reasoning behind that, which I know it's like why versus, but it actually creates a space for the FI user to step into if they do have any reasoning, as opposed to why is just kind of like how do I even begin to tackle that? Wait, am I supposed to know why? but I'm curious too if you have any reasoning. And if they say no, like I don't, it's like a softer way of like asking. It's kind of like not assuming. Um, and see, like when people ask me why now, I get excited because I've trained myself accordingly. And I've been like, well, I'm the kind of person who blah, blah, blah. And I kind of use TE to kind of access some way of feeding the person with TI, like some rhyme or reason for how my functioning is. And usually they can like engage then and help me actually flesh out the exact reason why. Okay, like, yeah, sorry. They can help me flesh out the exact reason why, like after that. But like I kind of start with generalities of how I usually operate and what I'm going off of from that. And that's just like something I've trained myself to do, because being an ENFP in the professional world, you have to learn to like logically like explain yourself more than you want to. But I think that in general, it is like our responsibility to be less reactive. But in the meantime, I think that a big thing I'd advise to ISTPs is to like have faith in your ability to rumble with the temperamentalness of people, because there is like a rhyme or reason for why they get upset, and sometimes just pausing and showing curiosity and wanting to be part of the solution instead of like rushing straight to the apology, being like I'm sorry, and I'm curious about how to remedy this because I didn't know, like my tone is very harsh. And like even that gesture of like staying to fix it and like keeping calm, like most people can like kind of get over it in theory. I mean, if they don't, then like my FI usually is kind of like, I mean, like here's a good intention here, like here's a like extended peace flag, like why are you like still feeling some way about it? But I do think that like spacing the fact that you can impact the situation positively and turn a negative one into a positive one is something I think ISTPs could stand to remember, because if your intentions are good, you just have to wait and have some patience for them to actually matter in the SE like result is how I see it.
Yeah, yeah, good to know. I'm gonna write some of this down, especially the part about how to ask an FI user why. Don't ask just why. You're like,
Yeah, like
or just because,
like I'm like I'm curious as to, like it shows that the FI user would translate that as, oh, you have FI about wanting to like connect with me about my reasonings. And then they'll feel more comfortable being like, I don't know. And FI user's relationship with the words I don't know is very ooh, like it's like very testy. They don't like looking stupid. That is TFI's greatest fear. TJ's FP's both. So if you give them a space to say I don't know without making them feel like they would be setting themselves up to look stupid, they're not going to look at you as the enemy anymore. Like just as how you're afraid of being moral enemies or morally showing moral animosity towards people and making them feel bad, like TEFI is like, I don't want to make you think badly of me, aka my intellect. Like an eternal thing for me is that I used to think that if I don't have TI, I'm just stupid and all my shit is just like straw man arguments or facts or whatever. And I'm still kind of dealing with that. But I think that a lot of like TIzers reminding me of my intelligence via me being vulnerable or them extending and standing by their good intentions, it has been what's bridged a lot of this. So I think that if you just soften and kind of implicitly reassure the person that you're not questioning their intelligence, you're just curious. If you say it that way, it's going to change how they see it.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I would have never guessed that like people would feel that their intelligence is being challenged by being asked why.
Because yours isn't
Never
challenged by
crossed my
yourself.
mind.
Yeah, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, like people can't rise to the occasion of having to adjust their intellect. Like it's not very implicit to them. I feel like the functions are all like especially the introverted ones, they have faith that the other ones that don't, the other people that don't have those functions don't. Like I have
Yeah.
faith in the moral flexibility of people to be able to, you know, like change their cadence. If they're being rude to me 1 minute, they could suddenly become nice to me. If they're nice to me, they could suddenly become rude to me. Which is why I was earlier suggesting that like if you guys are afraid of pissing someone off, just stick around and you can just unpiss them off. Like, or like if you offend them, you can just unoffend them. You just have to have the patience to.
Wait, you can do that? You mean they just don't say anything the
Doesn't
rest
make
of their
sense.
life?
You can't do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No, once they're offended, it's a game over. No, like, well, I mean, as someone who was a political reporter for a long time and has successfully diffused many debates, which, as you know, like in the US, well, there's a lot of those. I do believe in the power of changing people's emotional state in an implicit way. Like if they're like so prepared, it's like different than how FE smooths things over. It's more like, for me, it's active listening. It's listening to why they were upset and validating any parts that needed soothing, and then continuing to interact with them and treating like their sort of plight as like relevant to me and as something that's important to me. And I think displaying this act of good faith brings back people's faith. And it's easier said than done, but really though, people like, you don't like feel happy every day or sad every day, right? Like it's like positive emotions and negative emotions do come and go, and they kind of run out of rhyme or reason. And I think it is about like just finagling and asking questions in a neutral, curious tone, and continuing to say like, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but here's a question I'm like wondering. People just want to be heard a lot of the time when they're offended. They just want to know that someone cares, which is why an apology works. Like, I'm sorry suddenly makes someone not mad. Did that like fascinate you when you were younger? Like, but it really does. Like, it's like, I'm sorry conveys like presence, emotional presence, and people really want to see that.
Hmm.
Like before I'm sorry, after I'm sorry. Whoa, they just went from like mad to not mad after I said I'm sorry. Like I think
What's
that
the
that is
logic
actually
behind
like,
that? It's like,
yeah,
wait,
that's a great
what's this
example.
magic word, and why does it have so much power? I don't understand.
You're just like thanks for hours about it. Like people just want to be comforted. Like it's like, no, yeah, I'm sorry is like code word for um I value that I caused this problem and I'm going to stick around
Yeah.
to fix it. I
They
mean,
want
okay,
their
good,
feelings
I'm sorry.
validated too, I think. Like you want your feelings validated.
And half the time the validation is just to show I care, and because I care, I'm going to sit here and talk it through with you. And like that's like half the battle, you know? It's really that simple.
Mhm.
And to
I
me,
have
I had to learn to do that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I have noticed that, at least, like, not necessarily, because usually I think if you apologize, unless it's something that you can move on from, I think people don't want to hear an apology. It's like, I'm just not going to do that again. But I do notice that people appreciate if I react in a way that shows that I'm like, oh man, we done messed up. Like that you
Yeah.
acknowledge that you messed up or did something wrong, and not necessarily. I think sometimes I used to work with an INTJ, and she would
Oh
feel
my
like,
gosh.
well, I wouldn't offend
Like,
her, but if we would both be doing something at work and like do something wrong or mess something up, she would feel like, and I don't know if this is solely connected to FI or not, but feel like she needed to explain why she chose to do what she did, that it wasn't out of nowhere. And for me, I would just be like, well, we messed up. And because you
yeah.
accept that, and you're not necessarily like just not hearing excuses or saying your view of it, like saying what, like, well, I saw it this way. If you're more focused on how the other person is receiving it, I think they just take it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of this is like also coupled with some of my understandings from talking to ENFJs. But I really do think that presence is super important and can be conveyed like so quickly. Like people just want to like be seen. So like when someone's like, oh, like I was kind of annoyed or like upset by this thing, but it's no big deal. I guess like my FI just has thick skin where I'm like, if I don't acknowledge this now, it might become a big deal. Even if they say it's not a big deal, I'll be like, hey, like, you said it wasn't a big deal. And I like look them in the eye, maybe put my hand on their shoulder if we're close. And I go, I just want you to know that I'm sorry about that. I take this very seriously. And I would love the chance to make sure this doesn't happen in the future because your emotions and our dynamic matters to me.
I don't want to
And I
speak for
think that
everyone, but like if someone says it's not a big deal, I would take them at their word. I wouldn't even question, oh, it's not a big deal. Okay, great.
oh my
Let's
God.
keep going.
Well, I guess just as an ENFP, for me, well, as an ENFP who's done a lot of work trying to like learn about the other side of this, like I just don't take people's word at it, because I think
Yeah.
that even if it's not a big deal to them right now, maybe later they'll like get all feel in some way about it. And so this is planting a seed for later. Like it's like, all right, well, here's an apology. So you remember my good intentions. So the next time you get mad at me, possibly for the same thing, because really resentment is cyclical, then you'll remember this moment and you will capture it in your brain, even if it's unconscious because you're like an SI polar or something. You'll remember it. And I will build on that for next time.
Yeah, it's
Like,
consciousness to building on the their FI. It's like consciousness to their FI. Because like when they do bring
yeah.
it up the next time, it's like, but you said it wasn't a big deal. That even triggers
Right? Like it's like you tricked me. Like my FI is
Right.
always like, y'all, they can be tricky.
Whenever somebody says stuff like that, I just kind of ignore it and use the other information to figure out how they actually feel about it. Because when someone says like it's fine or stuff like that, that's usually because they're toning down. I usually see it as an FE thing where they're toning down how they actually feel, the way it comes across to you. But for me, I just want the actual information, you know, that they're trying to give you, and trying to see through their presentation of it. So I just ignore that part if they say like words like that.
I guess to me, in terms of time efficiency, I'm like, it takes me like just maybe like a few seconds to just say like, hey, but I am sorry anyway, and convey that presence, like drop into my body to say that to them. So it saves me more time in the future. So to me, I'm like, in case it's a big deal. But I guess this is also like a combination of NE, because my SI has just seen the pattern and cannot forget that when people say it's fine, they're only like actually telling the truth 8 out of 10 times. Like I'm just like, it's like a tell. It's like a very like sort of nuanced like way to like, I don't know, it's like a check engine light for me. I'm like, saw that thing flashed once. Nope. Like even if it flashed off suddenly, I'm like, nope. I don't know. Like I like just pay attention a lot to different tells, because I'm just like, I'm trying to keep my moral credibility, and also because you being mad is going to inconvenience me later. So this will just save me more time in the long run.
I don't actually care about you. I just care that you're going to waste my time in the future. So
that's the detachedness of FI. Like, I do care about you, and I care about me getting my time wasted. Win-win. Apologies. Now you know. That's what we're actually thinking. Now you can be like, I see you. If you see me offend someone, and if you somehow witness me like doing that live, like apologizing, you'll be like, I remember what Crystal really is thinking. So. And part of that is like, God forbid if you don't take this fucking apology, it's going to inconvenience me later when you get mad at me anyway, because I know you. And to be fair, like my FICs, the people that tend to say it's fine, aren't checking in with themselves enough, and it will come back. Like I'm just like, yo, like I guess I just think I know better than most people, and I do when it comes to some of their emotions. This is what you're saying, Jess, about how TI and FI parallel each other, right? Like I'm not like flexing on anyone, but I do understand the nature of emotions, and holy shit, like, oh my God, there's so much like red tape, right? I can see why for TI DOMs it feels like walking on eggshells, because it's not pretty, you know, like look at cancel culture. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. What do you think, Dave?
About what specifically?
Oh gosh. I'm like, hang on. It's like, let me reach deep into the SI abyss. I think about I'm malfunctioning because like I forgot the last few things we just talked about, but I think it was related to like if someone says it's fine, and if you like kind of move on, take it at face value.
I think it depends on a lot of factors, like how I would react to that. If someone says it's fine, it depends on how they said it's fine. It depends on the body language. It depends on what the thing that they're saying.
If they text it to you.
Yeah, and if it's something that
advanced.
they shouldn't be fine about, then I'm gonna doubt that it's actually fine, right? You know, and like a lot of factors go into like I guess how I would respond. I feel like most people, yeah, are not actually fine with most, at least things that seem like a big deal. I think most people just want to shove it under the rug and they want to deal with the emotions themselves and they don't want to immediately talk about it, right? Which, you know, I think anyone can relate to.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I try to look under that, like, okay, are they really fine? Or are they just saying that? Or like, are they usually fine? Or are they usually hiding, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess
And
I don't
then,
have a standard way of reacting to that, but
yeah,
yeah.
I'm always like, just in case you aren't fine, here's this apology. Oh, and another thing I think I was going to ask about was like the idea of like believing that you can just unpiss or unoffend someone, just undo it. Like, and I think I saw you had a kind of reaction to that. Like, what is your thoughts on that?
On unoffending somebody.
Yeah, just like I'm like just like stay in the interaction for long enough to just unoffend them and unpiss them off. Like they're pissed and now they're not pissed. And like, what do you think of this FI-ish sort of philosophy?
Yeah, I think I reacted to that the way I did just because like, you know, typically deciders don't like see it as like, oh, I fucked up one time, so no, I guess that's it. You know what I mean? Not all the
Like my
time, but like it's kind of like
yeah.
it's really simple in a lot of ways. And you forget that like, okay, people are a bit more reasonable than you would
Yeah,
believe, you know.
people are riding the waves. Just like
Mhm.
ride the wave until you come to another. I don't know
Yeah,
what I'm talking about. I don't know this analogy, but something about riding the wave.
I got you. Yeah, it's you know, offended, not offended. It's you know, it's eventually it comes back to calm, right?
Oh, yeah. I feel like I'm paying lip service to something I think actually this isn't natural for me necessarily. I think this is from spending my time with like four ENFJ best friends. I have a lot of them. I guess it's like my collector's editions. But yeah, like I
Like
think
collecting
it is
Pokemon.
that I know, right? It's the inferior FE here that you, by developing, you start to realize how people's emotions, there is this sort of FE sort of cadence of and you just hit different levers that function into how to make people like happy or not. And like the power does reside within you to just be there. And what people want is actually quite simple. You just have to then watch it kind of change form. And I realize that's hard with FE inferior, but I do think that testing it out next time someone's pissed at you, just kind of show patience and stick around for like wanting to talk about it. Depending on who it is, I think it might actually work out.
Yeah, it's kind of silly because yeah, generally deciders kind of feel like that, yeah, that if you offend somebody, then you know it's done. But like if you think about it yourself, like if you get offended, you're not usually that bad for that long, or you're
Yeah,
not really that
exactly.
mad about it. And usually it fades in like you know minutes and hours, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you forget that other people are like that too, and that
Yeah, they do. And like yeah, like no need to be perfect. You just have to
yeah,
like show up for it. And
yeah.
yeah,
I think
like
we're trying to be perfect in the FE a lot of times. Um,
yeah, the FE just requires the person to show up, not avoid out of desire for perfection, which I think sometimes TI DOMs can come off avoidant because they want to not mess up so badly that they end up kind of sort of turning about almost.
yeah.
Um, and then people are like, oh, do you even like care? And it's like, but we care so much. How's it not coming across? But yeah, I think that I had to learn something similar with like navigating the TE, which isn't as much of a pain point, but like I did learn that if I just kept talking, eventually I would start to make sense. And so I just did that more often until I started to make sense more often.
I
I'm
mean,
just like, dude, I
how
like
much
that. I
different than
don't.
doing it in your head? You're just doing it out loud, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm an extrovert or whatever to be fair, but I do think that it took me a while of just pure willingness to expose myself to that which makes me uncomfortable. Like, all right, I'm gonna get better at TE because if I don't get better at it, then who is gonna get better for me? But to liken it to my inferior I also that was like way harder to work on to be honest, but it was just like a I'm going to just look at this and choose to believe that if I don't get my room arranged the way I want, I can just try again. I can just like, there's no zero-sum game. It's not like if you piss off people, you'll get yourself killed. Okay,
Yeah.
like to be fair, like that's like probably not a good blanket statement because like there are some times where you should not piss off that guy with a gun, but in most cases, you're not going to die if you get back out there and just, yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's a statement for any inferior function. You're not gonna die if you mess it up, you know.
I know, even though it will feel like a death to your ego,
Yeah.
like you will be so like just embarrassed and fraught with like
Like,
despair.
I knew an ENFP that like she would like whenever she cleans or does like I don't know if cleaning is necessarily SI, maybe it is, but she would have to do it insanely perfectly, like everything
Yes,
really
yes,
go under,
yes.
or else
Oh my
it
God,
was
yes.
wrong.
Ah,
And she would do that like once a year, and so it's like no, just clean a little bit. Don't go that
yeah.
crazy.
Well, this is
Yeah.
actually fucking hilarious because I have actually invoked the exact thing. Like I used to be the cleans once a year, very precisely spot cleaning, and then beat myself up for not doing it more often. But now I'm just like, if I see it's dirty, I'm just gonna pick up the first thing I see. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I've started becoming someone who cleans. Wait, if I just do a little bit, suddenly it becomes a lot. And that was like how it was for me too. I think cleaning, it requires you to pay attention to your internal homeostasis about your environment.
Yeah.
So it is that like check-in. So I guess that's why people tend to tie it to that because cleaning is like the most, oh shoot, one sec. It's cleaning is the most immediate like manifestation and such. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, this has been a really lovely discussion. Wow, we went like for a long time, but this is really fun, guys. I hope you guys learned somewhat because I did. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a fun combo for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting and hopefully we'll have more in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
I'd love to. Thanks so much.